Red will be live, and so as soon as it's live, I'll kind of sit back and then I'll introduce myself and I'll introduce the books. We'll go straight to the interview.
All right.
We
perfect.
are on. Good morning. Welcome to KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. I am Paul Lane, and you are watching the Weekend Boost. I have been doing this show for a little over a year now, and I got to tell you, it's such an honor to be a part of this station. I'm just so humbled and grateful to know Henry Archuleta. I was just telling our guest today what a contributor he is to the society that we live in, and how thankful I am to have Henry as a friend. Those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are KUHS The Stream. Henry is, we have a great plethora of information, of entertainment, of music, of interviews. We just have so many things going on at the station. Please take the time to come and tune in and listen to the station. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce or show a couple of books from past guests that we've had on the show. Albert Quintana is a friend of the show. He's actually the host that was prior to me. He wrote quite a few books, but The Crochet Lady is one of the books that he's written. You can find his books at quintanareads.com. Albert was an educator in the Adams County School District. I am so excited about this next book and this author, Dr. Alyssa Robin. She's been on my show 2 times. She does astrology readings. She was the dean of UCD College. She's been involved in so many things, but she wrote this book on pirate wisdom on leadership. This week I went and had an astrological reading with her, and I got to tell you, man, it was for $125. It was the best investment. I've been feeling so wonderful since having talked to her and really gotten answers to things that I've had questions about. Rocio Perez, she's written this book on leadership. This is a woman who really, you talk about picking yourself up by your bootstraps. This is Rocio. She wrote this book, Unstoppable. It's a leadership book. She had a really rough start in her life, and she's really made things happen. Marilyn Saltzman was one of my guests. She's written this book, Your Love is Blasting in My Heart, A Grandmother's Journey. Wrote a book about Jewish methods of parenting, and really it's a leadership book too, but really fantastic book, Marilyn Saltzman. I am the author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story, and it was actually 1 year ago that I got my new release, my new book cover released, and so if you're interested in getting this book, you can get it. Call me on the station. You can reach the station at 303-255-0567. And with that, I'm going to introduce our guest for today. We are talking to Kimberly Sanchez Cawthorn. I'm sorry, I got that. So Kimberly's written a book, Love and Legacy, Amor and Eterno. Okay. So this book is really, really interesting. I just got it this week, so I haven't really gotten a lot into it. My girlfriend's read more of it than I have, but I love the title of this book. The writing in this book, just what I've read, has been so, it's gripping. It's really gripping. We both happen to share a favorite author, and so when we started talking, when we first introduced ourselves to one another, it was really exciting. And go ahead and Kimberly, welcome, and tell us a little bit about when we started talking about our favorite author.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so grateful and excited to be here. And I want to thank Henry and Albert Quintana as well, because he's the one that actually sort of set this whole thing up. So I just want to give a shout out to him and say thank you for having me here. I was so excited to talk to you about Victor Villaseñor. Oh my God, just one of my favorite authors of all time. And when I was a kid, I used to love to read. 3rd, 4th grade, 5th grade. And then, middle school, high school came along, and, there were other things that were more fun, right? And so when I went to college, and then there was required reading, that just didn't sort of speak to you the way, that other things would. And so when I got to college, I took a Chicana literature class, and I started reading Sandra Cisneros and Rodolfo Anaya, and then I found Rain of Gold, and I read it on my study abroad trip to Spain. And once I started the book, I couldn't put it down. Mm-hmm. It was just his style of writing. It was his the story of talking about his mother's side and then his father's side and the pattern of migration into the U.S. And it was just a story that spoke to me. And I knew that I wanted to do something similar. And, my identity was such a big deal when I was in college. And so I started doing a lot of research into genealogy and to find out where our family originally came from. And so I knew that I was going to do something important with that same style. And so he was definitely a huge inspiration for this book. And so I had to include him in it. And so there's lots of references to Reign of Gold in my book. And of course, the main character, Ariana, reads this on her own study abroad program. So yeah, I was excited to hear that you're a fan as well.
Yes, yeah. That's so funny because we both met Victor Villaseñor, and we met him twice.
Mm-hmm. I had the pleasure of meeting him twice.
I got to tell you, man, just meeting him once was such an honor, and you got to speak to him too, didn't you?
I did. So the first time I ever met him, it was at Colorado College, and he came as a guest speaker. And I'm in the audience, and he's throwing out this book called Snow Goose Global Thanksgiving. And so I just reached up my hand and I grabbed it, and I was so psyched to get it. It's just this tiny, thin little book, but it's so powerful and so impactful about his grandmother's wisdom and sort of what he believes the future, of the world is going to be in terms of women sort of stepping up and stepping into their role, and how there's supposed to be a balance, that's coming. And so it was just a powerful little book. And so anyway, I lent it to a friend whose basement flooded, and so I was so devastated because I lost that book and another one that I had lent to her. And so years later, I come to Denver. I'm working at, I think it was Horace Mann Middle School, and they had this huge author, conference or workshop with all the middle school kids. And so he happened to be one of the authors that was featured there. And I was so excited. So I told him, there was sort of a break in between some of the stuff that was going on, and I got to talk to him, and I said, hey, I have your book, but I caught it at Colorado College, but then, it flooded and got ruined. And he goes, oh, don't worry about it. I'll get you a new one. So he's like, come with me. So I walked with him to his car, he opened his trunk and just handed me a new one, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. My favorite author is actually just handing me a book out of his car. So it was so cool. That was just an awesome experience for me.
Dude, that is awesome, yeah. And if any of you know who Victor Villaseñor is, or if you've read his works, especially The Reign of Gold, I finished his book and I went and learned how to make tortillas, and I felt so much cultural pride in my family and the way that we came, and there's a lot that we don't know about our history, but I know that there was beautiful romance and adventure, and there were all kinds of things that Victor wrote about in his book, and I'm currently in touch with his office and hoping to hear from him very soon because he is finishing his most recent book, and so hopefully soon we'll be getting him on the show too. But
that would be wonderful.
Yeah. I met him at the cabin cover. Oh, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, I learned a ton too. I mean, the Chinese on the railroad, prohibition, the things that his family had to endure on their way to the U.S. from Mexico during the Mexican Revolution. I mean, so many different things and different perspectives, and of course the romance part of it is my favorite. I'm a hopeless romantic. So.
I'm terrible. I've always been, I'm one of these guys who likes chick flicks, and I like, I love romance, and I can't help it. I just, I'm in touch with my feminine part of it. I don't know what to say.
I love it. That's awesome.
So now, your book is, as I read it, I could just, the way you describe the, the water, or the moonlight, and it's so feeling. I could just feel that there's so much passion that was put into your book. It takes place starting in 1595.
1598. Oh yes, 1595. Yeah.
And so there's this young couple, and they're in trouble. Well, the young man's family is in trouble because he's Jewish during the Inquisition, and they had to flee. And so the story takes a life of its own from there on. So tell me a little bit about what inspired you. Was this really something that's kind of part of your family history, or is this just really something from your imagination? Or tell me.
A little bit of both. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, again, when I got to college, I'm from San Luis, Colorado, and my family's been there since 1851 with the Sangre de Cristo land grant. Before that, we were in New Mexico since 1598, came up with Juan de Oñate, and Diego de Vargas after the Pueblo Revolt, so we've been here for generations, hundreds of years. And so up to my dad's generation, they all spoke Spanish first. My generation was the first that didn't. And so the San Luis is homogenous pretty much, so the way that I grew up was, I was just used used to all the traditions and all of the, the food and the way we speak and all of that. It was just a part of who I was. It was a part of my identity, and I never had to question it because everybody there was pretty much the same. And so when I got to college, it sort of gave me like a ton of bricks, my identity. I got questions from every corner. People telling me my accent was so exotic, and where was I from, and where were my parents from, and where were my grandparents from, and I was like, I'm from San Luis, who we all are.
Yes.
So it was really difficult to explain all of those things when I hadn't been prepared to do that. And so part of my quest, one of the things that I kind of got a little bit of pushback for was calling myself Spanish, because that's what we had always called ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so, people asked me if Spain claimed me. People questioned whether I was trying to be more European and deny my Indian side, Native American side. I mean, it was just a whole plethora of different types of questions and pushback that I got. And so I started questioning myself, and I was like, well, where is my family from then? So then I started on this quest of genealogical research, and I did interviews with people from back home and started studying more about our history and where we came from. And so lo and behold, I found out that we've got Sephardic Jewish ancestry on both sides, and specifically on the Sanchez side. And it goes back to Pedro Sanchez de Inigo, and his grandmother was actually a Sanchez de Inigo, and that's where the DNA bloodline comes from.
Wow.
And so I was so fascinated by that because we've been Catholic forever, for every generation as far as I knew. And so for me, having the thought of Sephardic Jewish ancestry was fascinating. So I just started digging a little bit more into that and finding out that there was this population of Sephardic Jews in Spain, and during the Inquisition, many of them fled to different parts of the world, and a lot of them came to Mexico City, and lo and behold, came up with Juan de Oñate into New Mexico, and that's where my family came from. And so, I started thinking about, I knew I was going to do something with this idea, but I wasn't sure what. I had played with the idea of a play or a movie, a script, that kind of thing. And so it was in January, I think, of 2016, when my son was working on a paper for his class. And so he said, Mommy, do you want to write with me? And I said, sure, absolutely. So I took all of the stuff, all the little notes I'd written on my iPad, and I put them on my computer, and I started typing in. And for whatever reason, the floodgates just opened at that point, and the story came out. And so I had the idea of, what if there was this couple from 1598 that got separated during the Inquisition. One family fled to Mexico City, the other to Turkey, and then 400 years later, their descendants meet on a study abroad program, and they fall in love, and they have this connection that they can't understand, and it's because they're descendants of this couple from 1598. And so that was the premise of the story and the premise of the trilogy. So it starts off with Catalina, and it's going to end with Catalina and Benjamin in some fashion, but I can't tell you that.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, it's really getting good. I could feel just so much of your person as I'm reading the story. I just felt like you were Catalina. It's almost like you became the characters as I was reading, and I just felt like, wow, I'm really intrigued and very, very excited about finishing this book. I really like it. What was the Spanish Inquisition? A lot of people, history doesn't always teach us the whole story. What was the Spanish Inquisition?
Well, Spain has such a unique history, and I think there was a history of Celts and Iberians and people from Europe that sort of came to this area, and then they were. So I hate the word taken over, but I guess there's no really other way to describe it, by different, groups of people, the Visigoths, the Romans, all of these different groups came in and were there. And then from the year 700, it was the Moors, the northern Africans, that came in, and they were there until 1598. So they were there for over 800 years. And so there's all this, and of course the Jews, came in during that time too. And so there was this whole mix of people that sort of coexisted for hundreds of years at one point. And then when King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella came into rule, they decided that they were going to, reconquer Spain in the name of the church, the Catholic Church. And so they decided that they were going to push out anyone that sort of didn't follow that rule. And so they wanted everybody to convert. And for whatever reason, I think and they were successful. They pushed out the Moors little by little, starting from the north. And I think Granada was probably one of the last areas that got pushed out. And so they ended up being able to take over Spain, and under Christian rule, they came together. And I think it was Aragon and Leon, I want to say. I might be off on that, or Castilla and Leon, maybe. But anyway, so those two groups came together, and they decided that they were going to, have this land, and it was all going to be Catholic and Christian. And so they told everyone that if they didn't convert, that they would have to leave. And so that's the plight of many of the Sephardic Jewish ancestors that we have. And so they decided that many of them had lived there for generations, and they had been successful there. They were mathematicians, they were in business, they were in politics, they had high-ranking positions, and they were wealthy, and they had lived there, like I said, for generations, and they didn't want to leave. And so many of them converted in, facade, and they practiced their traditions, under the radar, on the down low.
Yeah.
And so they continued to do that until it got so dangerous that they had to flee. And I think a lot of them fled to Portugal first. Some of them, when of course Columbus came out here, they decided that they were just going to come to the New World because they wanted to be as far away from the Inquisition as they could. But little did they know that it followed them. Yes. So even in Mexico, there was the Mexican Inquisition, and there was lots of people that were tried. It was, a matter of life and death. They got caught. There was a list of all kinds of different things that they could get tried for. And they got caught with any of those things, then, of course, they could be hung. They could be, burned at the stake. And so it was definitely a matter of life and death, and they didn't talk about it. And so that's why, none of us ever knew that we had, this tradition. And I think, I want to say that none of us ever knew, but I know that in the Jewish tradition, it's important to pass down these traditions from the mother to the mother to the mother, or from the mother to the daughter, to the daughter to the daughter. And so there had always been, I think, these little stories and these little traditions that had been passed down from generation to generation. And people knew, they never said anything until, maybe there was a grandmother that was dying, and she would say, "Hey, I need to tell you the secret. This is who we are."
Nice.
There's all these different little practices that would, show that this is where that, came from. And so it's fascinating to me, that aspect of our culture. And of course, we have a multifaceted culture when we come from, northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. But that was one that really fascinated me because it was something I had never heard of. I had never grew up. But of course, when you start to pinpoint all of those little details, then you see, well, of course, this is where that came from.
Exactly. No, I want to just touch on something you said earlier, and this has always amused me. Is I've always been, I would hear people, Latino, Chicano, Hispanic people would say, "Well, I'm Spanish," and all my life when I was growing up, when I would hear someone say that, I would get so mad. And going back to Victor Villaseñor, he had a friend who was half Greek and half Turk, and he would talk about how the blood in him would fight within him because they were enemies, they were mortal enemies. And not that the Spaniards were enemies with anyone, but we have this, most of us have Native American blood in us, and we have Spaniard blood in us. And so I really believe that a lot of the conflict within the Chicano Latino community has to do with that conflicting blood that we all have within us. And what are your thoughts on that?
It's so fascinating to me. It's interesting. I think like I said, we have a multifaceted heritage. And we do have Native American ancestry. We do have Sephardic Jewish ancestry. We do have Spanish ancestry. I have a grandfather that was born he was born in 1590 in Lisbon, Portugal. So we have Portuguese ancestry. On my mom's side, we go back to Jacques Brolé, who was later named Santiago Boudoulet, and that is where that family line comes from in New Mexico. We've got German ancestry, Irish ancestry, because the Irish were Catholic, and they They could understand the Catholicism, that was within the Spanish culture as well. And so, yeah, there's all of these different histories and cultures that sort of came together with us. But I think, for me, what stands out is that the Spanish were very hard-pressed to have their culture, their language, sort of, dominate, I think. And so, because they were such a superpower at that time. And so what their ways is what went. And so we may have been French, we may have been Portuguese, we may have been Sephardic Jewish, we may have been Native American, but culturally we were Spanish because that's the dominant time. And that's the language that was spoken. And for us, that language that came with us, it never changed. It just sort of evolved, here in the U.S. The English language that came from the U.S. And so, for me, it's sort of that to call yourself Spanish. That's where that came from, in my opinion, because we had 300 years of Spanish rule.
Yep.
And we went against that. There were consequences. With the Native Americans. And you think of now that they wanted to remove the statue of Juan de Oñate. They would cut people's feet off if you didn't conform to either Christianity or to the Spanish culture. And so it was a very serious thing. And I think that was something that was sort of ingrained within us, as a culture, to be Spanish and what that meant. So
that's downright frightening.
It is. It's frightening. Things were kind of brutal back in the day.
Well, I know, and we talk about, and I don't want to get into a political conversation, but, it's funny because we talk about Islam, and it's like not we, but, the Christian society is not much above, what they're claiming other people are doing, and so it's really a pause to be humble, I think, and to be really aware. Now, as this story progresses, she wakes up one morning and he's gone. They were going to get married. He had told her the day before that they had to leave because they were Jewish, and they, the government authorities had found out they were Jewish. They have to flee, and she's going to go with them and marry him. And she wakes up the next morning and they're gone. That was just like, oh my gosh, what on this time in the opening pages of the book. So from there. It seems like there's the book really starts taking a life of its own. It really starts to become more and more gripping and more, I gotta see what happens tomorrow,
Thank you.
As you were writing this, I'm sure you had to do a lot of research and had to go back and really find out about culture and kind of find out about the history and so much research had to be done to make a book like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I did a lot of the genealogical stuff beforehand, and there was so much information out there. The historians and the genealogists from New Mexico are fantastic. They're just so amazing. Maria Clara Martinez from San Luis, Henrietta Christmas, Antonio Esquivel. There's so many different, like I said, historians and genealogists that have done all of this amazing research, and so I was sort of, excited and a little bit overwhelmed with all the stuff that was available to me, but I tried to take all of that information and dig a little bit more, a little bit deeper to find out exactly what they were kind of going through and sort of put myself in that position, and see, what would Catalina be thinking at that time, especially this is the love of her life. He's told her he wants to spend the rest of his life with her, and she has to choose whether she's going to stay with her family or whether she's going to, go to this unknown world with this person. And for her, it just wouldn't do to be in this space, even if it is her family. She had to be with him because without him, everything else was meaningless. And so she agrees to do this. And then she wakes up in the morning and he's gone. She's like, what just happened? And her whole world falls apart. And so, so the second book 2, is a little bit more about what happened with her after that.
Oh, cool.
So we know from book 1 that she marries David Romero and comes to Mexico City and then up into New Mexico with him. And so But book 2 is going to sort of talk a little bit about her journey on the ship from Mexico, Spain into Mexico City, and then a little bit about her journey up into New Mexico in the third book. And so, what was that like for her? And she ever get to see Benjamin again?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued now. I got home from work yesterday, and my girlfriend took the day off, and I got home, and she goes, "Hey, look how much of the book I've read." And I'm like, darn it, I was supposed to be that far. So I really think that as this book gets into people's hands and word of mouth gets out, I really see this as a bestseller. I really do.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much.
And so this is going to be a trilogy.
Yes.
So cool. And is the other 2 books partially written, or have you started them or finished them, or?
Yes, I already know how it's going to end.
That kind of book.
Yeah, I've had the ending for this trilogy pretty much since I wrote the first one. But it's, and so it's really interesting because this book, of course, came, like I said, the floodgates opened, and I wrote this story in a month and a half. It was the editing part and understanding the industry and trying to figure out how to publish this thing that took the longest. And so these 2 stories, I thought, well, I'll get started on the second book. And see what's going on. Like I said, I already know how the second book ends. I already have that written, and I know how the third book ends. But what's funny about these is that the inspiration has been coming simultaneously for both books.
Mm-hmm.
So the other day I was on my run, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got a scene in my head, and I had to stop in my tracks on my run to I pulled out my phone and pulled out pages and just started typing the scene so I wouldn't forget it.
Yeah.
And so it was for the third book. But so it's really interesting how this one is coming along, and so maybe the book 2 and book 3 will come out together. So we'll see. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I think that people need to get this book because I think there's a lot of not just history, but there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of relationship building. There's a lot of understanding about life itself because it's. We don't always get what we want, and things don't always go the way we want. But that's no reason why we shouldn't have continued dreams. I mean, man, this is a bucket list. This is something that what, guys? How many people write books? And I mean, a book like this is not a little book. This is intense experience and research. 327 pages and. To get yourself to just sit down and type page 1. What advice would you have for someone who's thinking about writing a book right now?
Write. Sit down, get on that computer and do it. Give yourself, a chunk of time every single day to do it. Some days are going to be easier than others. And when you keep a notepad with you, if you have something like Pages on your phone or something like that, or Word on your phone, keep that with you all the time because inspiration comes at any given moment. When I was writing the first book, I had to keep a notepad on the side of my bed because I dream themes, and so I'd have to wake up and write them down before I forget them in the morning. And so it was, just follow your inspiration. Whenever the inspiration comes, jot it down and keep a log of all of it, and just, like I said, give yourself that chunk of time. And for me, I think it was honestly by the grace of God that I got that book done in a month and a half. It really, there's no other explanation to me. It was something that had been brewing within me for more than 20 years, and so it just, when it started, it just came out, and it needed to be that way, I guess. And so, yeah, so for me, it's, I think just getting yourself to that computer and sitting down to write, or even on a tablet, just write your thoughts down. Mm-hmm. And you can always fine tune, you can always refine after that, but get your story out, mm-hmm. Get your thoughts out. So yeah, and don't, I always believed that I had to have a PhD to write a book like this, for whatever reason. I had that in my head, and I was like, no, there was a lot of reflection and introspection that had to be done, but I realized that everything I needed was already here. It was already within me. So I just had to sit down and sit and have the Dhammas, the courage, to say, look, I am a writer, I am an author, I am an artist, I can do this. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit of a confidence thing too. Don't sell yourself short.
Yep.
If this is your goal, don't let anything stop you.
You bet. I had so much self-help when I was writing, self-doubt when I was writing my book, because I've never taken a writing course. I don't know, I wasn't an English major, I just started writing, and I was very fortunate. My nephew Mitchell, he has a name Mitchell McConnell, but he's not that Mitchell McConnell. Anyway, my nephew Mitchell came and helped me edit the book, and he really helped it to get organized and put it in place. And you know, surrounding yourself with people who have those talents and skills is instrumental in the final process.
Yes.
Before we just need to do a station identification. If you're just joining us, thank you for joining us. You're watching KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. You're watching The Weekend Boost, and I am Paul Lane. We're talking to Kimberly Sanchez Cawthorn. She's the author of Home, or Love and Legacy, Amor and Entere, Book 1. Entero. I'm sorry. What does entero mean?
Eterno, eternal.
Interno. I'm sorry.
Eternal love.
Oh, okay, amor interno. That makes sense now. Okay, so we've been talking to Kimberly, and oh man, this is such it's a place where you can go and just leave this world. I mean, when I'm reading the pages of your book, it's just like, yes, I'm in Spain. I'm in 1598, and you know, I really like that the way you write this book makes you feel like you really have inserted yourself in the pages of the book. I think that was really a gift, and you know, so I want to compliment you on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
As you were writing, did you just? I'm guessing you had the whole outline in place, but you just kind of filled in the voids with so much history and entertainment, and just it seems like it's got a little bit of everything.
Well, you know, it's funny. I had heard, you know, I started joining all these like Facebook groups for writers and things like that to kind of sort of help me through this process. And I heard so much that the characters sort of take a life of their own, and that's kind of what happens with this story. It's like they just, you know, they sort of speak to you and tell you who they are, and you know, and everything sort of starts to unfold, you know, and it just keeps going and going and going, and so you start to think from their perspective, from both sides. The characters from the present time, it's Ariana and Luke. You know, what would Luke be saying at this time? What would he be doing? And I owe a lot of that, like the when you talk about as far as like feeling and the sensory detail, to my editor Caitlin Stark. She's just amazing. She's out of North Carolina, and she's getting her PhD right now to become a professor, and she's just fabulous. Like, she's the one that really helped me pull out a lot of that sensory detail to really bring the story to life. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, those are a lot of the things that, as a new writer of a novel, that I had to learn. You know, and of course, this was my baby, my first baby. So this was, when I wrote the first story, she loved it. But, you know, there were some things that I had to tweak, and so I had to sort of let go of my ego and say, you know what, you're right.
Oh, man, that's a tough part of writing a book, when you get the editor and saying, oh, what does this mean? You know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, that came back to me as you were saying that. Oh, man.
So what does this mean? Or, you know, it was funny. One time, there was one point where she said, because I said he pointed at so-and-so with his lips. And so one of her comments was back to me. She's like, I don't see how that could happen. And I said, just me. You're where I'm from. Things that I was like, okay, yes, I absolutely know what you're talking about. But then there were other things I was like, no, I gotta keep that. That's cultural. That's who we are. Yeah.
Yes. I had a couple of stories in my book that I really wanted in the book, and my editor says, you know, this doesn't fit this book, and I was like, no, I don't want to take it out, you know, and in the end I relented. But you know, when you're writing a book, if you all out there are considering writing a book, you know, remember that you have to be open-minded, and you have to really humble yourself sometimes, because you've written things that are crap. You know, there's things that you've written that are crap, and you might write some genius pieces of literature, but you have to keep in mind that you're writing from your own perspective, and as you get that book out and the editor's starting to look at it, you have to humble yourself, guys. If you're, you know, working and writing a book and you're thinking about it, just write. I mean, you're going to write good stuff, you're going to write bad stuff, and take the bad stuff out, and you know what, maybe some of the bad stuff will stay in, but you'll end up with something that you'll be proud of and something you'll really enjoy.
Absolutely, yeah. There was this one part, I was a lull, and I knew it when I wrote the first story. And she was like, well, we need more tension, you know, there's something that's missing from this part. And I was like, oh, I know you're right. I know you're right. So instead of tweaking that, I just pulled it right out and I just started all over. And I'm so much happier that I did that.
Yeah.
You know, if that would have been terca, stubborn, I would have just, you know, kept it in. It wouldn't be the book that it is today. It wouldn't be as exciting. It wouldn't have forced me to like dig a little bit deeper and push through and bring out that storyline, which I think was so much better.
Yes.
So much better. Yeah. You do. You have to be humble. You have to say, you have to listen. You know, you have to be able to say, hey, you know what, you're right. And again, it's your first, for me, it was my first novel, my baby. And I was like, you know, it's a little bit hurting to the ego.
Oh, yeah.
You have to, you know, you have to listen when things like that come up. So for sure.
Yes, yes. So once you had your book edited and you had your cover all picked out, where did you go from there?
Okay, so the cover, I decided I wanted my cousin Jerry to do, Jerry Santisteban to do this
hold this
cover.
up while you talk.
He is such his whole family, the whole Santisteban family are fabulous artists, from my cousin Sammy to Jerry and his nephews, and you know, they're just artists in lots of different ways. And so anyway, I knew that I wanted Jerry to do it, and I had found a picture online, and I don't even know, I tell you, you know, God, in my opinion, puts things in our paths for a reason, because I have not been able to find this picture again. And it was a picture of this little house in the middle of the llano, of this open space in Corral de Almaguer, where this story takes place. And there's trees in the background, and it's a field, and it's an old abandoned house, and it's a beautiful picture. And I was like, I have to have that as my cover. And so I called Jerry, and I said, hey, can you do this for me? Can you create this picture? I said, and but I want trees in the background, and I need a river, you know, because that's, you know, the theme of where Catalina and Benjamin are. And I want rolling hills in the background and, you know, olive trees and blah, 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 blah. And he was like, yeah, I could do it. I said, and I want it all encompassed in 2 shooting stars, you know, that form a heart. And so I gave him like my rough, horrible artistic sketch. And so he took that and turned it into this, you know, masterpiece that I have on my cover today. And then my editor, Caitlin, got me in touch with this graphic artist out of New York City. And his name is Logan Cannon, and just an amazing artist. And who knew there were so many fonts? When I came to that point, I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like,
yeah.
What? You know, there was like a million fonts to choose from, and I was like looking at all this stuff, and it was overwhelming. I was like, what am I going to choose? What's going to really speak to the story? And so, you know, he helped me narrow it down, and, you know, we looked through kind of, you know, what the style was from the 1500s and all of these different, you know, ideas. And I went to Barnes & Noble, and I took pictures of all of the, you know, historical fiction and romance novels that sort of spoke to me, and I took pictures of the covers, and I looked at the fonts, and so from doing that research, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
And sending him my ideas and my thoughts, and then he was like, okay, I think, what do you think about these fonts? And I said, okay, that's perfect. So, you know, and then he just put it all together, and we did it. But yeah, it took, those are the things that took a long time. So the story was written in a month and a half, and the editing and the, you know, graphic design and all that stuff took 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you go to a publisher to get your book published, or did you self-publish?
No, I self-published, and there's a lot of reasons behind that. I think I looked into publishing, but, you know, I wanted this story to get out quickly, and from all the research that I did, you could send your manuscript, you could send your, it's not a summary, what is it called? I can't remember the exact terminology for it, but it's sort of like a 2 or 3 page summary of what your book is about. And you send this in, and these big publishers may or may not respond. They will sometimes, you know, respond within 6 months. And then if you do get published, a lot of times you have to do 80% of the marketing anyway. And so for me, I was, I thought, well, I already know what my artwork is going to look like. I know what the title is. I want to be able to, I guess, sort of make sure that that stuff happens, you know, and if I'm going to do 80% of the marketing anyway, then I might as well just do it on my own, you know. And so I looked into the details of what that would look like. I have a friend who published her book, Mona Lisa Lovato, and I talked about her book in one of the interviews that I did, and she was really a huge help to me, and she had recently self-published her book, Forever. And so she just, you know, gave me a lot of different advice about what she went through and how she got to publish her book. And so I took that advice and I did some more research on Amazon and figured out what to do. And lo and behold, I did it. And it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yes.
Let me tell you, it was easy. There were days where I was like, especially when fonts didn't fit the right way into the KDP format and things weren't formatting the way that they were supposed to, and blah, 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 blah. Up until the very, very end, it was blood, sweat, and tears. But it's been well worth it. And I'm so grateful for all the positive feedback I've received from all the people who've read it. And it's just been overwhelming. I mean, I get a lump in my throat when I think of, a lot of the feedback that I've received of people who've read the book in a day, and it's just, or a week, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, you don't know what kind of feedback you're going to get when you put something out there like this.
Yes.
You put out your heart and soul, and it's scary. And then, when you get that kind of feedback, it's like, oh my gosh, when I did a presentation at Su Teatro, and there were some women in the audience, and after, there were 3 of us, it was a panel, and when we were finished and we had the Q&A, they stood up and some of them said, all of the work that I did, through my lifetime was to be able to hear you guys say what you're saying, to be able to hear that you guys are telling our stories, that, people will be able to know what happened in Colorado, what happened in Denver, what happened in the San Luis Valley, what happened in New Mexico, and for those stories to be out. This is the work that they did, and so for me it was like, oh my gosh, like this is bigger than even the story that I'm writing, you know what I mean? Like, so there's so many people that have worked hard for us to be able to get our stories out, and I'm so grateful. All of it has just been such an amazing, overwhelming experience. It's been unbelievably humbling and so fulfilling.
Oh, so self-fulfilling. Tell me about when you got your first hard copy of the book. Do you remember that day? Was it a highlight for you?
I did a cartwheel in the living room.
Oh yeah.
My kids were there and they were laughing at me. I was like, look, oh my gosh, and I did this cartwheel, and it was like 8 in the morning and I hadn't stretched.
Oh, yeah.
I sat there and I was like, okay, I pulled a muscle, but I'm happy.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Such an incredible feeling.
It is.
I'm like looking through these pages and I'm like, this is something I wrote.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's so cool. At least for me, I'll be talking to someone and, and they'll say, well, what do you do? And, oh, yeah, I do this, and this. And I wrote a book, and it's like, I wrote a book. And so it's not just a bucket list thing. It's an accomplishment. It's a legacy. It's something that when you leave this earth, this will remain. And this will touch lives 100 years from now. And it's something that you have made a mark that is a long-lasting mark that is it's wonderful. It's positive. I think that people will really be able to grow from this book and feel cultural pride, and that's really what I love most about it, is that cultural pride. Yeah, I love that. I didn't realize that was 2 shooting stars. So if you look at the cover of the book, there's one coming here and there's one coming here, and they form the heart, and they're 2 stars of David.
Yes.
So that is really cool. That's I'm glad you pointed that out, because that just kind of brings more meaning to the book, to me.
Yeah. Every little piece is meaningful for me.
Who were some of your heroes as you were growing up and writing the book, and inspirations to move you into this besides Victor Villaseñor?
My heroes, geez, that's a great question. I think I have had a lot of mentors along the way. Of course, my parents, and my grandparents have always been a huge inspiration. And I dedicated this book to my 2 grandmothers, Jenny and Emma, and they were real Proverbs 31 women. The kind that got up and worked. And yes, absolutely, they worked. My grandmother, on my mom's side, she worked outside of the home, and she had an immaculate home, and she cooked and baked and had everything. She was always prepared for any situation. She took care of all of her brothers and sisters, and she took care of her kids, her own kids, and and so that strength, that power, all of that, that inspired me. My grandmother on my dad's side was the same way. She had 6 kids, and so she would sew for them and make sure the house was clean for them. And then she was outside helping with the gardens and the cows and the the farm, and she was baking and cooking stacks of tortillas and, countertops full of bread and beans and all of this stuff. And so they embodied, what the Proverbs 31 woman, in my opinion. And so for me, those two women were huge inspiration in my life. Of course, teachers. Larry Martinez was my English teacher in high school. Charlie Hawkes was my math teacher. Mr. Gomez, all of these teachers in high school sort of inspired me. Roger Briones, because they believed in us, and they encouraged us along the way. And then in college, there was, professors that I had. John Riker, he, was the one that helped me, or he held Dream Group for us. And he sort of taught me, how to analyze my dreams and how to use that in my life. And so, he was a huge inspiration to me. Clara Lomas was the professor that I took Chicana literature with. And so she was one of the ones that got me back on, into the loving reading again. Lots of, friends of mine, Nancy Hernandez, Joanna Leyva, she was a senior when I was a freshman in college, and she said she saw the look in my eyes freshman year. She was like, I need to take her under my wing, because she knew it. Because she had done something similar, Yes. And then we get to talking, and she's like, you talk like my mom. And I'm like, well, where's your mom from? She's like, oh, she's from Los Sauces. It's like up the street from San Luis, and so, one of my best friends, Colette, was from Walsenburg, where you're from. So,
really?
A lot of these people that have come into my life have been a huge inspiration. And people I've met in Denver, again, Janine Vanderberg taught me how to write grants, and Joanna Mays, huge inspiration. She's a professor at Boulder, Steve Boulder right now. So all of these people, I think that have sort of come into my life, and other, personal friends and acquaintances that I've had along the way have just inspired me, I think, to do the work that I'm doing. People that have told me that they believe in me, that I'm strong, that I can do this, to breathe.
Yes. What's the most beautiful thing about what you just said? Now you can take your place with those mentors and with those leaders and with those teachers and those inspirations. And it's so exciting to get this opportunity, because I am talking to someone who is a future Victor Villaseñor. No, I know, I believe it. I really believe this book has to get into the right hands. Where can someone find your book, Kimberly?
You can find it on Amazon. Search Love and Legacy, Amor Eterno, or search for Kimberly Sanchez Cawthorn. You can find it either way. You can also follow me on Instagram.
YouTube?
At Kim Sanchez Cawthorn. Facebook is pretty private right now. I have several things that are public, that I've set to public, and those are just the interviews that I've been doing lately through my business, La Gente Legacy. You can also watch the interviews that I have been doing, so this is kind of cool to be on the other side of an interview, because I've been doing all these different interviews since June, and so that has been one of the highlights of during this COVID time. This COVID time has been such a roller coaster ride for all of us, I think. And so doing these interviews that I've been doing with successful people from the San Luis Valley has really, really inspired me and sort of kept me afloat. I'm a germaphobe extrovert. So it's been like a especially difficult time for me. But doing these interviews with these people has sort of given me the chance to sort of connect, with people again, and to hear their stories and to document their stories and to see, how people have reacted and just loved hearing about their friends and family, and just getting their stories out there, documented, and talking about the wonderful things that these people are doing has just been incredibly, just an incredible blessing for me, and they're on the La Gente Legacy YouTube channel. So, if you Google La Gente Legacy on YouTube, all of these interviews are going to come up, and there's a bunch of different ones from the military to education. There's the makeup artist, and now there's going to be a healthcare series where I have a couple of interviewees that are in the healthcare field, and hoping to do one on politics pretty soon. So yeah, so it's just been it's been great. It's been an amazing journey so far.
So cool.
Yeah, back to your question, you can find you can find Love and Legacy Amor Eterno on Amazon.
Have you gone to the Tattered Cover bookstore yet?
I've been there and I've inquired about it. I just have not sent in the application to get it.
Yes.
Get it out there.
So they have a section of local authors, and that's how I got mine. Is not in there currently, but it was my last book. But there's the local authors is really the best way, and I can't remember the name of the person that you talked to over that Tattered Cover, but yeah, that's they say that when you're a new author, that's where you want your book first. So just a little insight for you, and I'm talking about that. I got to do that myself.
Yeah. I'm also speaking of doing that ourselves. I think I was just gonna say we got to support each other. I'm also part of a new group called Calma. It's the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors, and that's actually how I met Albert Quintana. And it's a group of us from the Denver metro area that have come together and decided that we need to promote our work. We need to help each other out. We need to provide resources for one another as far as graphic design and
yes.
Just networking to
yes.
really help us promote our stories. And so Calma will be coming out pretty soon. We've got a website, Calmaco, so CALMACO.org. And on there you'll find about a little over 30 authors that will soon be featured. And so, upcoming events, one of the things that we want to do is a mixer with a bunch of, the Latino writers and authors from Colorado, just to sort of get to know one another and to, see where we all are in this process and to help each other further our dreams,
Oh, that's
and
so cool.
So, yeah, definitely check that out. And again, it's very new, so it's up and coming, but the website is up, and you'll be able to see more as time comes along. So.
Very cool. Very cool. I remember as a young man, I went to a Latino community leader, and I really admired him, and I looked up to him, and I said, hey, I really would like to be mentored by you. And he said, you got to mentor yourself. And I was brokenhearted. I was so brokenhearted because I really thought that this would be the guy that I would want to learn from and grow with. And when I made the decision that if anyone ever asked me to mentor them, I'm going to tell them, come on down.
Yeah.
Someone says,
Absolutely.
hey, I need some help. We have an obligation as human beings. I don't care what culture they're from. We have an obligation to further the cause of love and prosperity and happiness to other people. I mean, we're not responsible for their success or happiness, but we can be an integral role in that. And especially if someone of color, I mean, we need all the help we can get. We have enough challenges in this society as it is. So tell me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I completely agree with you. Go ahead.
COVID. So now that COVID's hit, has it hindered the sale of your book, or has it had an impact on your writing or on your career, or has it been a positive thing for you?
Well, to be honest with you, it's really interesting. I had like 2 or 3 speaking engagements that I had to cancel because of COVID, and I was so very blessed to be able to do a presentation that I did at Colorado College on March 5th. Because that was it. That was the last of it. I had one at the Genealogical Society, Colorado Hispanic Genealogical Society, that I was supposed to do, and of course that one got canceled. But I was so grateful to at least get that first one out, and done. And so that was such a blessing for me. And so I was like, okay, so what's next? We can't do these speaking engagements. We can't come together as a group. What's next? And so of course, the second and third book have been on my mind. I'm like, okay, so now I have all this supposed time on my hands. So I'm a teacher, so all the way through May I was teaching and trying to help my students through the final quarter of spring semester. And so I was doing that, helping my kids through that process as well. And so that was a challenge. And so then June comes along when school is over, and I'm like, okay, I'll have some time to write my second and third books now. And so, but let's backtrack a little bit to April, and I'm watching Good Morning America, and they have Pitbull on, and they're interviewing him, and he said a bunch of things that inspired me, and I talked a little bit about this in the video I did for my YouTube series. But one of the things he said is that if you don't use social media, it'll use you. And I was like, hey, so for whatever reason that like struck a chord with me, and I had always wanted to do this, a book of biographies about successful people from the Sandus Valley, because when I was in college, a friend of mine called me one day and she said, hey, she said, this professor just said nobody educated comes from out of the Sandus Valley.
Yes, I heard
And
that.
I said, what? And she said, yeah. She said, he actually said, it was a sociology class on deviant behavior. And she knew that wasn't true. She was from the Sandus Valley as well, you know, and she knew that I was in my last year of Colorado College. We had a friend that had just graduated from UCCS, blah, blah, blah. So she knew that was off. And so I never forgot that story. And so I wanted to compile this biography book with Ken Salazar, Holly Waka, you know, all these amazing people that I knew, and even people from back home that were doctors and lawyers and teachers and, you know, just amazingly talented and, are, you know, and successful people. And so for whatever reason that book came to my mind, and I was like, hey, I can put this on social media. And so I started thinking about how that process would look and doing research about how I could do it. And so that's sort of been my summer with my business, La Gente Legacy, and as far as like writing is concerned. So I'm writing in a different way. It's more video and documentation about people's lives and people's stories. And so that's sort of where I've been, and you know, intermittently writing these themes that keep, you know, coming to my head, and I keep getting, you know, inspired for my second and third book. But yeah, that's kind of what COVID has done, and you know, I've been trying to do as many fun things as I can with my kids within, you know, the constraints and the restrictions that we had. And like I said, I'm a germaphobe, so we don't get to do a whole lot. You know, we venture to places that are open and tend to stay within our neighborhood and do fun things at home, creative cooking and baking and, you know, badminton in the yard and volleyball in the yard and, you know, stuff like that. So it's been a roller coaster ride and just such an interesting process. But yeah.
No kidding.
That's where COVID has led me. And so I'm hoping it's over soon, because I want to get out there and talk to people and actually have people again, because, you know, it's just been tough.
It's been tough. I've gone through a lot of personal growth and personal changes, and I mean, I've seen a lot of, the best and the worst in people have, you know, have come out during this, and it's, you know, we gotta, in a few months here, we got a big decision to make, and, you know, and it's really important that we get our friends and families to the polls, you know. So I just want to put that side note out there for those of you out there. Please vote. Please vote. Yes. Your vote does count, and you know, not voting is voting. But if you don't vote, you're voting for the guy that won last time, and we need your vote. I'm sorry, but we need the vote. This is our whole democracy really is in trouble, and I don't want to get too far off, but I just wanted to throw that in there. I always like to ask my guests one thing about gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
What's your feeling on gratitude, and how does gratitude affect or work in your life?
Oh my gosh, you have to live by gratitude. Otherwise, you know, especially in a world like we're living in with COVID, it's so easy to get to the negative. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to fall in that. And I'm not perfect. I can't say that, you know, that I live my life with gratitude on a daily basis, and I try to. I wake up every morning and there's a prayer that from Psalms that I say, and through that prayer I think about at least one thing. Usually it's between 3 and 5 things that I can think of that I'm grateful for from the day before. You know, the prayer says, you know, ask the Lord to show you his unfailing love, and I look for how he's shown me his unfailing love from the previous day when I first wake up in the morning, and that gets me started with my day. And it could be something simple as my son giving me a hug or cuddling with me on the couch or something like that. It could be, you know, my daughter saying thank you, Mommy, for everything that you do for me. Mm-hmm. Or for us. You know, it could be the fact that I was able to run 3.8 miles, you know, and not be like dying when I get home. I mean, it's little things like that. And so that's kind of how I try to live my life. And like I said, I'm not perfect. And, you know, sometimes things get the best of you, you know, when you get down and but you got to dust yourself off. You got to pick yourself up and dust yourself off. And those little instances of gratitude help push you forward.
Keep on going.
You know, it's a word from somebody. It's, you know, somebody that gives you a word of encouragement or inspiration. that you remember, you know, and so that's what keeps you going every day.
Yes.
Just knowing that God is right there with you every step of the way and being grateful for that, you know. So I don't know, the sunrise, I love sunrises, I love sunsets, the colors. I look at those things. The other day I was on my run, and it was funny, I had to post this because I have this, I'm a part of a group called Sandals Valley Tough, and they asked us to post our pictures of, you know, the workouts for the day. And everywhere I went, like on my run, I kept seeing these hearts, and it was like, it was different things. It was like, you know, somebody was watering their lawn, and whatever splashed onto the sidewalk was in the form of a heart. Right. And there was at least 4 or 5 of them, and so I put it together in a collage, and I posted that. I was like, what's God trying to tell me?
Yeah. Love that.
So yeah, those are the gratitude things I thank God for every day. So.
Well, Kimberly, I've so much enjoyed having you on today's show. It's been just so enlightening, and I'm inspired. I really am. I really feel every time I have a new author on, I just feel like, man, I need to get myself started on my next book. And folks, we are about to wrap it up. We've been talking to Kimberly Sanchez Cawthorn. She's written the book Love and Legacy, Amor Entorno, sorry. And so this is a book that is a love story. It's a story of adventure. It's a story of deep history, and it's a wonderful. I just believe. Get this book. It's on Amazon. Take a look at it. Kimberly Sanchez Cawthorn has been our guest. Kimberly, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Paul, for this opportunity. It's been amazing. It's been like talking to a friend, and I just appreciate that so much.
So glad to have you. All right, folks. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Well, turn the music back on.
Wow, that was pretty cool. You were right, it did go by fast. Did you hear that? I just have to. Thank you so. Oh my God. My mama.
All right.
You're gonna make me cry. Amazing. Awesome. You are too, sir.
Thank you.
You're awesome.
That was great. Thank you for